Welcome back to Hong Kong, Miss Lin. I smiled in the darkness of the car. He still remembered my voice. 3 years ago, I left this city bleeding in the rain, not from wounds you could see, but from the kind that carve themselves into your bones. The kind that teach you exactly who you are when everything is stripped away. Tonight, I returned with fire in my veins. My father once taught me one rule, whispered over expensive cognac in rooms where men decided the fate of empires. If someone betrays you, don't kill them. Make them watch you rise. At the time, I didn't understand. I was young. Naive. I believed love could conquer bloodlines, that sacrifice proved devotion, that hiding who I was would somehow make me worthy of being chosen. I was Lin Wan'er, the hidden daughter of Lin Wan'er, Hong Kong's most feared Triad leader. The Phoenix Heiress. A secret kept locked behind false names and manufactured obscurity, protected not by bodyguards but by absolute anonymity. No one knew who I was. Not even the man I loved. For 3 years, I played the role perfectly. The scholarship girl. The nobody. I stood in shadows at galas where my own family's empire was praised. I smiled through charity events funded by my father's money. I erased myself completely, all for him. Chen Yichen. Brilliant. Ambitious. Beautiful in the way predators are beautiful, sleek, hungry, magnificent. I gave him everything. Connections whispered through anonymous channels. Business deals that materialized like magic. Doors that opened because I bled to pry them apart. I built his empire with my invisible hands, watching him climb higher and higher, believing that when he finally reached the summit, he would turn around and pull me up beside him. I was a fool. 3 months ago, I received a wedding invitation on cream cardstock with gold embossing. Chen Yichen and Bai Shui cordially invite you. Bai Shui. The woman claiming to be the Phoenix Heiress. The imposter wearing my name like a stolen dress, sitting in my seat at my father's table, accepting congratulations for a bloodline that wasn't hers. And Chen, my Chen, stood beside her with his hand on her waist, announcing to Hong Kong's elite that he'd finally secured his place in the Lin Empire. Through her. Through my stolen identity. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. Now the black sedan pulled up to the Grand Lotus Hotel, where tonight's engagement gala blazed with 1,000 lights. Inside, they would be celebrating. Toasting their future. Believing they had won. They had no idea. The phoenix doesn't die in ashes. She rises from them. I stepped out of the car, my red qipao catching the light like fresh blood. Zhao Ming appeared at my side. Silent, lethal, the only man who had never asked me to be anything other than what I was. Ready. He murmured. I smiled, and it was a sharp, dangerous thing. They're not. They called me Emma at Cambridge. Emma Chen, the name I wore like a second skin, carefully constructed to be forgettable. International relations major. Decent grades. The kind of girl who smiled politely at networking events and never drew too much attention. I met Chen Yichen at a university mixer, both of us pretending to be impressed by mediocre wine and cheaper conversation. He was studying business, all sharp ambition wrapped in charm that felt dangerous and intoxicating. When he looked at me, I felt seen for the first time in my life. I didn't tell him who I was. How could I? My father's enemies would have killed me for leverage. His allies would have used me as currency. The Phoenix Heiress couldn't exist in daylight. She was too valuable, too vulnerable. So Lin Wan'er disappeared into Emma Chen, and I convinced myself it was protection. It became a prison. Chin talked about his dreams constantly. Building an empire. Earning respect. Making a name that would echo through Hong Kong's elite circles. I listened, entranced, watching fire dance in his eyes as he described the future he would conquer. I wanted to be part of that future. So I became his invisible architect. When he needed an introduction to a venture capitalist, I made a phone call from a burner. When his startup required seed funding, anonymous investors appeared with my father's money laundered through shell companies. When competitors tried to crush him, they mysteriously backed off after quiet conversations in rooms he would never enter. He thought he was brilliant. He was. But brilliance without resources is just potential. I gave him everything except the truth. I told myself it was love. That I was building something beautiful, that when the time was right, I would reveal myself and he would understand. He would see that every victory was ours, that we had built this empire together, that I chose him when I could have chosen anyone. 3 years of sacrifice. 3 years of watching him succeed while I erased myself a little more each day. I stopped going home for holidays. I ignored my father's calls. I let my own identity wither while Chen Yichen bloomed into exactly the kind of man Hong Kong's elite courted. The kind of man who could marry into a Triad dynasty. I thought I was being selfless. I was being stupid. The night before I planned to tell him everything, my father called. His voice was cold, careful. There's a woman claiming to be you. Bai Shui. She has convinced certain people she is my daughter. My blood turned to ice. Chen Yichen has requested permission to court her. The phone slipped from my hand. I had sacrificed everything to build him up. And he was using my empire to marry my ghost. I flew back to Hong Kong 3 days later. Chen didn't know I was coming. Why would he? Emma Chen was just a girlfriend left behind in London, convenient for a season, forgettable in the long term. The kind of girl ambitious men outgrow when better options present themselves. I watched him first from a distance, studying the man I thought I knew. He moved through Hong Kong's elite circles like he'd been born into them, no longer the hungry student with big dreams. His suits were bespoke now, Italian. His watch cost more than most people's cars. He had learned to hold power casually, the way men do when they've forgotten what it felt like to be powerless. My money had bought him that confidence. He didn't remember where it came from. The first time I saw them together, I was standing in the shadows of the Mandarin Oriental lobby. Chen had his hand on Bai Shui's lower back, possessive and casual. She laughed at something he said, and the sound was crystalline, practiced, the laugh of a woman who understood her value in a transaction. She wore a jade bracelet I recognized. My mother's bracelet. Something cold and final settled in my chest. I could have revealed myself then. Screamed the truth across marble floors, demanded recognition, shattered their beautiful lie with facts and fury. But I had learned patience in my father's house. Revenge is a dish best served cold, he used to say. But I preferred it served publicly with witnesses. 2 weeks later, I engineered our reunion. Chen's company was hosting a networking event for young entrepreneurs. I bought a ticket under my real name, Lin Wan'er. Not that it would mean anything to him. He had never known that name. When he saw me, recognition flickered across his face, followed quickly by something that looked almost like annoyance. Emma. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't know you were in Hong Kong. Surprise, I said softly. Bai Shui appeared at his elbow, all delicate beauty and calculated grace. She looked at me the way expensive things look at cheap imitations. An old friend? She asked Chen, her Mandarin flawless, accent perfectly Beijing. From university, he said dismissively. Emma, this is Bai Shui. My fiancé. He said it like a warning. Like I was a complication he needed to manage. I smiled and extended my hand to her. Congratulations. He's very lucky. I'm the lucky one, Bai Shui said, her grip cool and brief. Chen has such a bright future. I wanted to laugh. His future was built on my foundations, and this imposter was standing on my throne wearing my mother's jewelry. I'm sure you'll both be very happy, I said. Chen's jaw tightened. Emma, perhaps we could talk? Privately. Of course. He led me to a quiet corner, and when we were alone, his mask slipped. What are you doing here? I live here now, I said simply. You need to leave. I tilted my head. Why? Because, he stopped, recalibrating. Because it's complicated. Bai Shue's family is important. This is business, Emma. You wouldn't understand. I wouldn't understand. The boy I built couldn't even remember my hands and his foundation. You're right, I whispered. I don't understand at all. But I would make him understand. Soon. Bai Shue was a masterpiece of deception. I spent the next week studying her the way a jeweler studies a fake diamond, searching for the flaws invisible to the untrained eye. She had done her homework, I'd give her that. She knew the right restaurants, wore the right designers, quoted the right poets. She moved through my father's world with practiced grace, accepting deference as though she'd been born into it. Almost perfect. Almost. I watched her at a charity gala, standing beside my father. Lin Zhenbong looked older than I remembered, his hair more silver but his eyes still sharp enough to cut glass. He treated Bai Shue with careful politeness, not warmth, I noticed. Not the affection a father shows a daughter. Protocol. Performance. He was waiting too. Bai Shue held court among the wives of Hong Kong's elite, and I listened from nearby, nursing champagne I didn't drink. The Phoenix heiress, one woman cooed. You must have so many memories of growing up in the Lin household. Oh, countless, Bai Shue said, her smile luminous. Though father always kept me sheltered. For safety, you understand. Convenient. A built-in excuse for any gaps in her knowledge. And your mother? Another woman asked. Such a tragedy. I prefer to remember her joy, Bai Shue said softly. She loved traditional opera. Kungfu was her favorite. My mother hated opera. She loved jazz. I felt the lie like a blade between my ribs. The women murmured sympathetically, completely taken in. Why wouldn't they be? Bai Shue had the jade bracelet, my father's tacit acceptance, Chen Yichen's devotion. She had constructed an identity so complete that questioning it seemed absurd. But I knew the truth. And I wasn't the only one. Across the room, Zhao Ming stood in the shadows, watching. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He had been my father's head of security since before I was born. He had taught me to throw knives in the garden when I was 7. He had driven me to the airport 3 years ago, the only person who knew I was leaving. He knew exactly who I was. And who she wasn't. Later that night, I found Bai Shue alone on the terrace, scrolling through her phone. The gala lights cast her in soft gold, making her look ethereal. Untouchable. I approached slowly, deliberately. Beautiful evening, I said. She glanced up, recognition flickering. Emma, wasn't it? Lin Wan'er, actually. I smiled. I don't use my English name here. Something shifted in her expression. Quick, barely perceptible. Fear. Calculation? Wan'er, she repeated. That's a lovely name. It was my mother's choice, I said softly, before she died. Did yours choose your name? Of course. What was her name? The question hung in the air like a knife. Bai Shue's smile never wavered. I don't discuss family matters with strangers. Of course not, I agreed. Privacy is so important in families like ours. Tell me, do you still have that jade bracelet? The one you were wearing last week? Her hand moved unconsciously to her wrist. It was bare tonight. It's being cleaned. Ah. I leaned against the railing beside her. Jade is delicate, especially antique pieces. My mother's bracelet had a hairline crack near the clasp, from when she fell at my 5th birthday party. Does yours have any history? Bai Shue's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I really should rejoin the guests. She walked away, her posture perfect, her composure intact. But I had seen it. The seed of doubt, planted and beginning to sprout. She knew I was dangerous. She just didn't know why yet. The engagement banquet was held at the Peninsula Hotel, in a ballroom that dripped with crystal and old money. 500 guests. Every major family in Hong Kong. The kind of event where alliances were forged and reputations were made or destroyed. Perfect. I arrived late, deliberately. My dress was crimson silk that moved like water, traditional enough to show respect, modern enough to turn heads. Zhao Ming appeared at my side the moment I entered, silent as always. "Miss Lin," he murmured. Just those 2 words, but they carried weight. He still called me by my real name. Chen saw me from across the room. His expression darkened, but Bai Shui was already rising to greet guests at the head table, resplendent in white and gold. She looked every inch the Phoenix heiress, seated beside my father with Chen at her other side. My father's eyes found mine. He nodded once. Permission. The dinner progressed with excruciating formality. Speeches praising the union. Toasts to the Lin family's continued prosperity. Chen spoke about honor and legacy, his voice smooth, confident. He had become the man I helped create, and he wielded that power without a trace of gratitude. Bai Shui glowed under the attention, accepting congratulations with practiced humility. Then came the gift presentation. Traditional red envelopes were offered, along with jade pieces, gold, investments. The wealth of Hong Kong laid at their feet like tribute. I waited until the presentation wound down, until the room had settled into satisfied murmurs. Then I stood. The room quieted gradually, conversations dying like ripples on water. "Forgive the interruption," I said, my voice carrying. "But I have a gift for the bride." Bai Shue's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in her eyes. I walked to the head table, every eye following me. From my clutch, I withdrew a small box wrapped in red silk. "This belonged to my mother," I said clearly. "She gave it to me on my 5th birthday. I've kept it safe all these years." My father's expression remained unreadable. I opened the box. Inside was a jade ring, carved with a phoenix rising from flames. Delicate, ancient, unmistakable. Bai Shui stared at it like a serpent. "Every Lin daughter receives one," I continued. "Made from the same imperial jade, each one unique. The Phoenix heiress's ring has a particular marking, a tiny character carved inside the band. My mother's name." I held it up to the light. The character was clearly visible. "Surely you have yours?" I turned to Bai Shui, my smile gentle. "Poisonous. Perhaps you could show everyone? So we can see them side by side." The silence was absolute. Bai Shui's face remained composed, but color crept up her neck. It's in the family vault. For safekeeping." "Of course," I said softly. "How careful of you. Though it's tradition to wear it at one's engagement banquet. My mother wore hers. I assumed you would too." Someone coughed. Whispers began, spreading like fire. Chen stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate." "Is it?" My father's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. Lin Jinbong rose slowly, his gaze moving between Bai Shui and me. When he looked at me, something ancient and knowing flickered in his eyes. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we should discuss this privately." But privacy was too late. The seed of doubt had bloomed into full exposure, and everyone in Hong Kong had witnessed it. Bai Shui's mask was cracking. And Chen finally understood what he had lost. The Lin family manor sat on Victoria Peak, behind iron gates that had stood for 3 generations. I hadn't seen it in 3 years. The gates opened for me without hesitation. Zhao Ming drove in silence, the car climbing the winding road as Hong Kong glittered below us like scattered diamonds. My father had called me here the morning after the banquet, a summons, not an invitation. Bai Shui's car was already in the courtyard. Good. Inside, the manor looked exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, antique scrolls, the scent of incense and old power. My footsteps echoed across marble floors that had known my childhood laughter, my mother's grace, my father's iron will. I found them in the main hall, my father seated in the patriarch's chair, Bai Shui standing before him like a defendant awaiting judgment. Chen stood beside her, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. They turned when I entered. "Wan'er," my father said. Just my name, but it landed like a gavel. Chen's face went white. "Wan'er," he repeated. "Your name is?" "Lin Wan'er," my father said coldly. "My daughter. The Phoenix Heiress. The woman you courted in London under a false name, then abandoned when you found someone more convenient." The silence was devastating. I watched Chen's mind work, watched him piece together every anonymous donation, every mysterious door that opened, every impossible success. Watched him realize that Emma Chen had never been a nobody. She had been everything. "You lied to me," he breathed. I almost laughed. "I lied? I concealed my identity for safety. You betrayed me for ambition." "I didn't know." "Exactly." The word was a blade. "You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. You loved what I could give you, not who I was beneath it." Bai Shui had gone very still, very quiet. Survival instinct, perhaps. Recognizing when the game was over. My father stood, and the room seemed to contract around his presence. "Miss Bai," he said, his voice terrible in its calm. "You infiltrated my family. You wore my wife's jewelry. You claimed my daughter's identity and nearly succeeded in stealing her inheritance." "I can explain," Bai Shui started. "You can leave," my father said. "Now. If you're in Hong Kong by sunset, you won't see sunrise." She fled. Chen started to follow, but my father's voice stopped him. "Mr. Chen, you requested permission to marry into the Lin family. I'm prepared to grant it." Chen turned, hope flickering stupidly across his face. "My daughter is now available," my father continued. "If she'll have you." Every eye turned to me. Chen looked at me like I was salvation and damnation wrapped in crimson silk. 3 years ago, I would have wept with joy at this moment. Would have forgiven everything for the chance to stand beside him. Now I saw him clearly. A man who loved power more than people. Who had discarded me when I was inconvenient and would take me back now that I was valuable. I smiled. "No." The word echoed through the hall like a death knell. Chen's face crumbled. But I had already turned away, walking deeper into the manor, into rooms that had always been mine. The Phoenix had come home. And she had no use for men who only loved her crown. I found Mrs. Zhou in the kitchen garden, tending to herbs the way she had for 30 years. She looked up when my shadow fell across the basil, and her weathered face softened with something that looked like relief. "Miss Wan'er," she said quietly. "You're home." "I am." I knelt beside her, ignoring the dirt on my silk dress. Tell me about Bai Shui. Her hands stilled among the leaves. Please, I added gentler. I need to know how deep this goes. Mrs. Zhou had been my mother's housekeeper, then mine. She had braided my hair as a child, taught me which herbs stopped bleeding, which ones made men tell the truth. She had kept every secret this house held. Now she would give me one more. She came 6 months ago, Mrs. Zhou said finally. With papers. Photographs. A story about being raised abroad for safety, just like you were. She paused, her voice dropping. She had your mother's handwriting. Letters, supposedly. I knew they were fake, but they were good fakes. How did she get in? Money. Lots of it. She paid off 2 junior staff members to corroborate her story. They're gone now, your father saw to that. Mrs. Zhou's jaw tightened. But there was someone else. Someone higher up who helped her. My blood went cold. Who? She looked at me with ancient eyes. Chen Yichen. The world tilted. He approached me first, she continued. Offered me money to confirm Bai Shui's identity. Said it would be better for the family, better for business. When I refused, he threatened to tell your father I'd been skimming household funds. She laughed bitterly. 30 years of loyal service, and he thought I could be bought or frightened. What did you do? I went to Zhao Ming. He went to your father. And your father. She smiled slightly. He decided to wait. To see how far the deception would go. To see who could be trusted. A test. Everything had been a test. Chen knew, I whispered. He knew she was fake. He brought her Miss Wan'er. He found her, groomed her, taught her enough to pass. She was his investment. A way into the Lin family that didn't require loving someone as complicated as you. The words landed like stones in deep water. All of it. Every moment of betrayal had been calculated. Chen hadn't simply fallen for someone else, he had manufactured a replacement. A simpler version of me, one he could control. I had thought him ambitious. I hadn't realized he was monstrous. There's more, Mrs. Zhou said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. The night before your mother died, she gave me something. Made me promise to give it to you when you came home. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small key, ancient brass worn smooth with age. She said you'd know where it fits. I took the key with trembling fingers. I did know. The locked drawer in my mother's study, the one I'd been forbidden to open as a child. She knew, I breathed. Even then, she knew I'd need this. Mrs. Zhou's eyes glistened. Your mother always knew, Miss Wan'er. She just didn't know when. I stood, the key warm in my palm. Chen hadn't just betrayed me. He had tried to erase me entirely. But the dead, it seemed, had left me weapons. My mother's locked drawer contained a single leather portfolio. Inside were documents. Contracts. Recorded conversations. A complete dossier on Chen Yichen's business dealings. Every bribe, every threat, every illegal transaction he'd made climbing to power. Some bore my invisible fingerprints, donations I'd facilitated. But others were pure Chen. Fraud. Extortion. Deals with men my father would never tolerate. My mother had been watching him. Protecting me even from myself. The annual charity auction was in 3 days. Hong Kong's elite gathered to bid on art, jewelry, and influence. This year, the proceeds benefited children's hospitals, a cause my mother had championed. I made a single phone call. The Peninsula Ballroom glittered with old money and older secrets. I arrived in black this time, mourning colors, a deliberate choice. The dress was simple, devastating. My mother's phoenix ring caught the light like a promise. Chen was there with his business partners, trying to salvage his reputation. When he saw me, something like fear flickered across his face. Good. He should be afraid. The auction proceeded normally at first. Ming vases. Calligraphy scrolls. A 19th century necklace that sparked a bidding war between two taipan's wives. Then the auctioneer's assistant brought out an unmarked portfolio. Our final item, the auctioneer announced, donated anonymously. A collection of business documents. Historic value only, naturally. We'll start the bidding at 1 million Hong Kong dollars. The room murmured, confused. I raised my paddle. 5 million. Silence. Chen went very still. Going once, the auctioneer began. 10 million, a voice called from the back. Zhao Ming stepped into the light, paddle raised. Others joined. Business leaders. Politicians. People who understood exactly what was being auctioned and why it mattered. Not the documents themselves, but the allegiance their purchase represented. Chen's face had gone white. 50 million, I said clearly. The room held its breath. 60 million, said a woman I recognized, the head of Hong Kong's largest bank, someone my father respected. 70 million, called a shipping magnate. They weren't bidding on paper. They were bidding on loyalty. Declaring publicly which side of history they wanted to stand on when the smoke cleared. Chen stood abruptly. This is absurd. Those documents are legally obtained. My father's voice cut through the room like a blade. He had been seated in the shadows, watching. And voluntarily donated for a worthy cause. Please, Mr. Chen. Sit down. You're disrupting the proceedings. Chen's partners had already moved away from him, subtle shifts that spoke volumes. The bidding continued. 100 million. 120. Numbers that had nothing to do with value and everything to do with power. Finally, at 150 million, the room went quiet. Going once. Going twice. The auctioneer's gavel hung in the air. Sold to bidder 47. My father's number. He would burn those documents, I knew. The information was already distributed to the right people. Insurance, not ammunition. But the message was clear. The Lin family protected its own. And I was a Lin. Chen tried to leave, but Zhao Ming blocked his path, silent and immovable. Others watched, their expressions ranging from pity to contempt. In 3 hours, Chen had gone from rising star to cautionary tale. I walked past him on my way out. You taught me something valuable, I said softly, so only he could hear. Power isn't about who you love. It's about who loves you back. His empire was built on sand. Mine was built on blood and loyalty. The Phoenix throne wasn't literal. It was a chair in the Lin family's private council room, carved from blackwood and inlaid with jade. My grandfather had sat there. My father sat there. No woman ever had. Until tonight. The council gathered at midnight, as tradition demanded. 12 men who controlled Hong Kong's underground empire, each one dangerous, each one calculating. They had known me as a child, as a rumor, as a threat. Now they would know me as their leader. My father sat at the head of the table, but the chair beside him, the Phoenix throne, remained empty. I entered alone. Zhao Ming had offered to accompany me, but this walk I had to make myself. The council room doors were 15 feet of carved mahogany, heavy enough to require 2 men to open. I pushed them open with one hand. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. 12 pairs of eyes tracked my movement as I crossed the room. I wore red again, the color of celebration and blood, traditional and modern at once. My mother's phoenix ring. My father's steel in my spine. I didn't ask permission. I sat in the phoenix throne. The room went absolutely silent. Gentlemen, I said quietly. I am Lin Wan'er, sole heir to the Lin dynasty. I have spent 3 years in exile. 3 years watching my empire from the shadows. 3 years learning who could be trusted. My gaze swept the table. And who could be bought? One man shifted uncomfortably. He had supported Bai Shui's claim I knew. Had accepted Chen's bribes. I'm not here to punish past mistakes, I continued. I'm here to prevent future ones. The Lin family has stood for 3 generations because we value loyalty over ambition, honor over greed. My father built this empire. I will expand it. With respect, Miss Lin, one elder said carefully, tradition states. Tradition, my father interrupted, his voice like iron, states that the strongest leads. My daughter has proven her strength. She has exposed deception, commanded loyalty, and demonstrated patience when others would have chosen violence. He stood. I'm old. The empire needs young blood. Strong blood. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Phoenix Heiress, he said formally. Rise. I stood. My father removed the jade seal from his neck, the symbol of absolute authority, and placed it around mine. The Lin family recognizes its new head. One by one, the council members stood. Some faster than others, but all of them. They bowed. Not to my father. To me. Afterward, in the quiet of the manor's garden, I found Zhao Ming waiting in the shadows where he always waited. Congratulations, he said softly. I couldn't have done it without you. I turned to face him. You've been loyal to my father for 20 years. You protected me when I was no one. You stood beside me when I had nothing to offer but danger. You've never been no one, Wan'er. The use of my name, without title, without distance, made something in my chest tighten. Chen wanted me for what I could give him, I said. What do you want? Zhao Ming stepped closer, and for the first time I saw something other than duty in his eyes. You. Just you. Crown or no crown. I had spent 3 years believing love required sacrifice. I was wrong. Love required honesty. I kissed him as the Phoenix Heiress, as myself, as both and neither. He kissed me back as the man who had never needed me to be anything but real. Chen came to the manor 3 days later. Zhao Ming brought him to my study, my mother's study, now mine, and remained by the door. Silent. Watchful. A reminder that I was never unprotected again. Chen looked diminished somehow. His expensive suit couldn't hide the hollowness in his eyes, the weight of consequences he hadn't anticipated. His business partners had abandoned him. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. The empire he'd built on my invisible foundation was crumbling, and everyone knew why. He stood before my desk like a supplicant. I didn't offer him a seat. You could destroy me, he said finally. The documents. The testimony. You have everything you need to put me in prison for 20 years. I could, I agreed. Why haven't you? I set down my pen and looked at him, really looked at him. 3 years ago, this man had been my entire world. I had believed his ambition was beautiful, his hunger admirable. I had mistaken his using me for needing me. Now I saw him clearly. Not a monster. Not evil. Just profoundly empty. Because prison would make you a victim, I said quietly. A martyr. The man who fell in love with the wrong woman, who made mistakes in the name of ambition. People would sympathize. They would forget. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the harbor. I want you to live, Chen Yichen. I want you to wake up every morning in whatever small apartment you can afford. I want you to apply for jobs and watch doors close in your face. I want you to see my name in the news. Phoenix Heiress expands empire, Lin Corporation breaks records, and know that you had it all within your grasp. I turned to face him. I want you to remember that the girl you discarded built everything you've lost. That the woman you called complicated was actually invaluable. That you traded real power for the illusion of control. His face had gone pale. You're exiling me, he whispered. From Hong Kong's elite? Yes. From the city itself? No. That would be mercy. I smiled, and it was gentle, terrible. You'll stay. You'll watch me rise. You'll see what you could have had if you'd been capable of loving someone instead of using them. I did love you. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. Silence hung between us, heavy with everything unsaid. Bai Shui, he asked hoarsely. Gone. Taiwan, I think. She was smart enough to run. I returned to my desk. You weren't even smart enough to choose a convincing replacement. Chen's hands clenched at his sides. Anger, finally. Good. Let him feel something other than ambition. I could tell people. Tell them what? I leaned back in my chair, my throne in everything but name. That you orchestrated fraud? That you tried to steal from the Lin family? Please do. It will make the exile more complete. He had no moves left. No leverage. No power. Just the rest of his life to contemplate his choices. Zhao will see you out, I said, returning to my paperwork. Dismissal. Final and absolute. Chen left without another word. Through the window, I watched him walk through gates that would never open for him again. He looked back once, his face a portrait of loss. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not grief. Not even pity. Just the quiet certainty that some punishments are worse than death. Living with what you've lost is one of them. 6 months later, I stood on the manor's terrace watching the sun set over Victoria Harbor. The city sprawled below like a glittering empire, half of it legitimately mine, the other half respectfully afraid. The Lin Corporation had expanded into 3 new markets. Our legitimate businesses now outpaced our shadow operations, my doing, my vision. My father had built an empire on fear and blood. I was building one on strategy and inevitable dominance. The difference mattered. Behind me, I heard Zhao's footsteps. I knew his rhythm now, the way I knew my own heartbeat. The Singapore deal closed, he said, stepping beside me. They agreed to all our terms. They had no choice, I said, smiling slightly. We offered them partnership or obsolescence. Generous of you to give them options. I laughed. A real laugh, something I'd forgotten how to do in the years I spent being Emma Chen. Zhao had taught me how again, in quiet moments between empire building. He made me remember that power didn't require self-erasure. He touched my hand, a casual intimacy that still made something warm unfurl in my chest. Your father wants to announce our engagement at next month's gala, he said carefully. What do you want? I turned to face him. Zhao Ming had never been beautiful like Chen. He was all sharp angles and old scars, competent hands and eyes that saw too much. But when he looked at me, he saw Lin Wan'er, not the Phoenix Heiress, not the empire, not what I could give him. Just me. I want you to choose me because you want to, he said. Not because it's strategic or expected. This was the difference. Chen had demanded I choose him by erasing myself. Zhao refused to let me choose him unless it was completely free. Yes, I said simply. His smile was rare and devastating. Yes to the engagement, he asked. Yes to all of it. You. Us. The announcement. I laced my fingers through his. I spent 3 years giving everything to someone who wanted me to be less. I'm not making that mistake again. I don't want you to be less, Wan'er. I want you to be exactly this. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture achingly gentle. Terrifying and brilliant and absolutely yourself. We stood there as the city burned with light beneath us, two people who had found each other in the aftermath of betrayal. Not because we needed saving, but because we chose partnership over possession. Someone once told me that love requires sacrifice. They were wrong. Love requires honesty, loyalty, the courage to stand beside someone as they become who they're meant to be, not demand they shrink to fit your ambitions. Chen had wanted a crown without a queen. Zhao wanted me, crown, empire, sharp edges and all. In the distance, I could see the Peninsula Hotel where this had all begun. Where I'd returned with fire in my veins and revenge in my heart. I had burned down the lies. Reclaimed my identity. Built something stronger than what existed before. The phoenix had risen. And this time she chose the man who had been standing in the flames beside her all along. Not because he needed her to elevate him, but because he'd never needed her to be anything other than real. "Come on," Zhao said, pulling me gently toward the manor. "Dinner's getting cold." I followed him inside, leaving the empire to glitter in the darkness. Tomorrow I would rule it again. Tonight, I was just a woman who had learned the difference between love and betrayal, power and fear. And finally, I was at peace.